Iceland is often imagined as a peaceful land of waterfalls, northern lights, and quiet villages resting beneath snow-covered mountains. But beneath this calm surface lies a history shaped by disaster so relentless that survival itself became a national achievement. Iceland's story is not just about beauty, it is about fire tearing through the earth, plagues wiping out generations, and a nation that stood on the edge of extinction more than once. From the moment humans arrived on the island in the late 9th century, Iceland began testing them. The Norse settlers who crossed the North Atlantic were drawn by open land and freedom from kings. What they found instead was a fragile paradise balanced on top of geological chaos. Iceland sits directly on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where tectonic plates pull apart, allowing magma to rise again and again. This geography was not a background detail, it was destiny. Early Icelandic society was small and isolated. Farming was difficult, the climate unpredictable, and the margin for error razor-thin. A single bad summer could mean starvation, yet the people endured, building a unique society without a king, governed by laws and assemblies rather than armies. This early independence was remarkable, but it also meant Iceland stood alone when disaster arrived. Volcanoes became Iceland's most terrifying companion. Eruptions were not rare events, they were recurring nightmares. Lava flows swallowed farmland, ash poisoned livestock, and toxic gases drifted across the island. When volcanoes erupted, it was not just destruction in the moment, it was famine that followed, sometimes lasting for years. The most catastrophic eruption in Iceland's history came in 1783 with the awakening of Loki. Unlike a single mountain exploding, Loki ripped open a massive volcanic fissure that poured lava across the land for 8 months. Thick clouds of sulfur filled the sky, crops failed almost immediately, grass turned poisonous, livestock collapsed in the fields, hunger spread faster than the lava itself. By the time the eruption ended, Iceland had lost roughly a quarter of its population. Entire communities vanished. Survivors described a sun that looked red through the haze and air that burned the lungs. This was not just a natural disaster, it was a slow, grinding collapse of society. For a small island nation, losing 1 in 4 people was a blow from which recovery seemed almost impossible. But volcanoes were only part of the threat. Disease followed weakness like a shadow. Plagues swept through Iceland repeatedly, carried by ships or spreading through malnutrition-weakened bodies. The Black Death reached Iceland in the 15th century and returned again decades later. Each wave erased large portions of the population, leaving farms abandoned and knowledge lost. Isolation made these outbreaks worse. Medical knowledge was limited, and help from abroad was slow or non-existent. Iceland was under foreign rule for centuries, first Norwegian, then Danish. Decisions affecting survival were often made far away, by rulers who did not understand Iceland's brutal reality. Trade restrictions tightened the noose during famines, limiting access to food when it was needed most. By the 18th century, Iceland's situation was dire. Repeated eruptions, climate cooling during the Little Ice Age, and constant disease pushed the island toward collapse. Some Danish officials seriously considered evacuating the population entirely. Iceland, they believed, might simply be uninhabitable. The idea that the island could be abandoned was not fantasy, it was discussed as a practical solution. This was Iceland's closest brush with extinction, a nation reduced to desperation, balanced between endurance and disappearance. Yet something remarkable happened. Iceland refused to vanish. Survival demanded adaptation. The people learned to live with uncertainty as a constant. They diversified food sources, relying more heavily on fishing when farming failed. Communities became tightly bound, sharing resources and knowledge. Storytelling, poetry, and sagas preserved identity even when material life collapsed. Culture became a form of resistance. Over time, Iceland also learned to turn its greatest enemy into an ally. Volcanic activity, once only destructive, would eventually become a source of power. Geothermal energy, born from the same forces that once caused famine, now heats homes and generates electricity. What nearly destroyed Iceland became the foundation of its modern strength. The 19th and 20th centuries brought gradual transformation. Independence movements grew stronger, fueled by a desire to control Iceland's fate rather than endure decisions made elsewhere. In 1944, Iceland finally became a republic. For the first time in centuries, it stood fully on its own. But even modern Iceland has not escaped crisis. In 2008, the country's financial system collapsed almost overnight. Once again, Iceland faced international headlines predicting ruin. Once again, the nation adapted. It restructured, rebuilt, and refused to disappear. The pattern repeated, not with lava and ash this time, but with economic fire. Today, Iceland is admired worldwide. It ranks high in quality of life, renewable energy use, and social stability. Tourists walk across lava fields unaware that these landscapes once brought starvation and death. The same volcanoes that attract millions nearly erased the population that now welcomes visitors. Iceland's true story is not one of effortless beauty. It is a story of endurance shaped by geography so extreme that survival became a cultural trait. Fire, plague, isolation, and collapse were not obstacles to overcome once, but cycles repeated across centuries. Each time, Iceland stood at the edge and chose to remain. This is why Iceland matters in the story of the world. It proves that geography does not just influence history, it pressures it, reshapes it, and sometimes nearly ends it. Iceland did not conquer empires or command vast armies. Instead, it mastered something harder: survival against the planet itself. The island that once seemed destined for abandonment now stands as a symbol of reinvention. Beneath the ice, fire still waits, but so does a people who have learned, again and again, how not to disappear.